Um, okay, so pushing right along, the next survival style is something called the trust survival style. This is a difficult one. The other two, connection and attunement, those are primarily survival styles where people act in. So they sabotage or damage themselves. Now we're getting to a survival style where people act out. And so this is like I now, inflict my trauma onto the world around me. And this is one that does that. Um, so how does it start? Um, when you're younger, you're helpless. You're completely dependent on your caregiver. You're completely dependent on your environment, right? So you're not able to go out and fend for your own as much as you wish you could. I know a lot of toddlers just swear they wish they could. When I was a kid, I swore I wish I could be grown so I can get out, be my own boss and all that. But unfortunately, I was dependent and helpless, right? I needed my caregiver. Um, so normally that's okay. You have a caregiver or a parent or an environment that, your dependency is not used against you. You're not a freeload. You're not considered like a freeloader, for example, because you're a 12-year-old who needs a parent to, keep a roof over your head and all that kind of stuff. This survival style develops when that dependency is actually abused in some way. And so this is when you have the parent who does consider the child as if the child is a freeloader or something, or is bad, or is problematic because they are dependent. Um, and that's where like we have things going off the rail. I actually like the idea of Mean Old Mister from The Color Purple. Everybody's seen The Color Purple now, in some form. He is an example of the trust survival style in action because he takes advantage of like dependency. A lot of the men in that movie take advantage of the dependency of the young girls who just have nowhere else to go. Um, and so this like abusive dependency actually shows up in some common ways. And these are the three archetypes that are kind of discussed by the psychologists in this approach to therapy. Um, One is the caregiver who lives vicariously through the child. And so, I couldn't be a cheerleader, or I couldn't be, the quarterback of the football team when I was younger. And so I'm gonna make my son, be the quarterback and be the star. Or, I need my daughter to be the beauty pageant winner that I couldn't be. Um, that's kind of an example of like a betrayal of the child's dependency, because the child kind of learns that like, well, I don't get to be myself. I'm dependent on my parent. I need to be who my parent is wishing I would be. I need to, go ahead and play out this role that mom or dad didn't get to do, in order to kind of get by. Another example is a parentified child. Um, I see this a lot with my personal experience. Just from my limited experience, I've seen this happen a lot with young boys, where it's like you got to be the man of the house now. Um, but it also definitely happens a lot with young women, and the color purple is yet another example. You have like a baby like Celie who's now um, acting like she's a grown woman taking care of a household, right? That's too much too soon. And then the other example where that dependency is betrayed is acts of horror. And so let's say those children over in Gaza that are witnessing bombs being dropped and like their siblings being killed. I met a refugee once a long, long time ago. I forget where he was. It was somewhere in the Middle East, and he was describing like how people sometimes have to go through rubble after a place has been bombed, and like literally they go searching for the limbs of their family members, like finding the arms, the legs, and trying to piece their bodies back together. To witness something like that as a child, it just robs you of your childhood, essentially. And so all of those things are examples of just betrayal, right? Like it kind of does not allow you to be the baby that you're supposed to be, and you don't get to be who you are. You don't get to even learn who you are, and that's what ultimately produces this adult survival style. Physically, inflated chest, these kind of like puff their chests out, stick their head up high, that kind of thing. Um, I think all of that is part of this overall theme of like this is the type of person that's like, well, don't ever let them see you sweat, don't ever let them see you cry.
Mhm.
Beyonce had those lyrics in her Sorry song. She's like, suicide before you see a tear fall down my eyes. That's kind of what, is the mindset behind a lot of that stuff, this survival style. It's like, I can't show weakness. I can't show vulnerability. But underneath that are these feelings of helplessness and powerlessness. I mean, there's that unresolved trauma from childhood, like, like seeing a war or seeing, something less extreme, seeing just violence. And how many children do we know? I know, that I've even witnessed in my own life, like children that
Mhm.
have just seen a lot of violence and a lot of horrible things that just you can't be a child anymore after you've gone through those types of things. But that sense of helplessness and powerlessness is still there, and it's unresolved. Um, Failure seems to be another common thing. Like underneath this kind of sometimes bravado is feelings of like weakness and failure. So they often feel like frauds. Because weakness, vulnerability, helplessness is like their core issue, they get very good at recognizing it. And so this is the person, I picture like if you're a new prisoner, sometimes you have that stereotype of like, um, the other inmates looking at you and they can see, that's, fresh meat. Like this is like a weak or vulnerable person. They're
Mhm.
very good at recognizing like where the soft spots or the weaknesses or, where other people feel vulnerable. They're also very good at something called projective identification. This is the evil eye. So, have any of y'all seen the evil eye like talisman? So it's this like blue
Mm.
circle with a black dot
Yeah,
in it.
Mm-hmm.
All
yeah.
right.
Hmm.
Okay, so y'all kind of already know the background on that, where it's like, no jealous or negative energy
Right.
Mm-hmm.
behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, the projective identification, it's like whatever I disown in me. And so let's say I feel what's, a common feeling, like I feel dumb. Let's say I feel dumb, like I'm working
Hmm.
through that issue. So what I might do is find somebody else and attach myself to that person who I can, say, oh, this person is dumber than me.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'll do is just harp on like how dumb they are. Like God, I'll make them and so they'll oftentimes, let's say, especially if they're insecure about that, because I'm really good at recognizing people's insecurities. This person is insecure about feeling dumb, and so what they don't know is like I'm equally insecure about that issue, but I dump it on them, and so and they'll resonate with that, and so they'll go about their lives feeling even worse. Like they'll feel dumb, they'll feel stupid just because I've actually manipulated them into feeling that way so that I can feel smart by comparison. So a lot of these people will care or like attach themselves to people that allow them to look good or feel good by comparison. So they put this person down so that they can be kind of lifted up. Um, and that person will often go along with it. Core beliefs: life is a jungle, it's a dog eat dog world, survival of the fittest. They see life as sort of like a battlefield almost. And so you got to do what it takes to win the battle. And oftentimes they're the most likely to manipulate other people, intimidate them, or just overall abuse and dominate them. Um, Two ways that happens is you have what's called a seductive subtype. This is like the used car salesman. It's like, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. I'm going to flatter you to get what I want. This is the Romeo who will tell that girl, I'm going to tell you whatever it takes to get what I want out of you, like that kind of thing. Um, Sometimes the stereotype is like the woman also who seduces a man, makes him feel, some kind of way just to like get in his wallet, like all those stereotypical manipulative things are what this subtype is really good at doing. Again, it's all with the core belief that like the world is dangerous. You can't be dependent. You can't be vulnerable. And so you got to armor up and do whatever it takes to, get ahead and get bread. Um, for the more severe end, so like especially those that have witnessed violence and witnessed some sort of horror or abuse, they tend to default to what's called the overpowering subtype. And this is, we talked about those default emotions, right? Where like, previously depression for the attunement people, like They just default to depression, even though that's not really what's going on. Here, it's anger. This is the type where it's like, especially in men, it's just anger and outburst is just the default feeling. Anytime they're triggered, it's like, now I'm mad, I'm yelling, you know. We may all know people like that, where it's like they just yell or they just blow up. But underneath that, what they're actually feeling is like hurt, or what they're actually feeling is that they're just scared, or you know, whatever it may be. But
Mm.
you know, the anger, the outburst, the intimidation, you know, that's just sort of like the only way they know how to express what they're feeling. Um, and yeah, this idea of like it's a jungle, I got to be ready. You know, but also underneath that, I actually feel helpless and vulnerable. That shows itself in like their sort of combat readiness. They're most likely to carry a gun. So like think, you know, I think like the NRA kind of people, they're like, you know, don't take away our guns. I need my gun, Second Amendment, blah, 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 blah. Well, what's really going on is that they feel kind of scared and helpless, and just having access to a gun helps them kind of remediate that helplessness that they really feel underneath all of that. And unfortunately, with these types, like they go more extreme, the more that underlying helplessness is triggered. So the more intimidated they feel, the more they will work to intimidate you. Um, Same thing with this other style. Like, so the more, let's say, just going back to that previous example, like the more dumb they feel, the harder they're going to work to make you feel dumb. Does that make sense? So like whatever's going
Mhm.
on with them, the worse it is, the worse they're going to make it for somebody else.
Right.
But this is what's going on underneath all of that. Usually feelings of weakness and failure, usually feeling like they were betrayed or they were taken advantage of, or that they're small and helpless. And then, you know, they overcompensate for that by controlling, or because they were used or they were taken advantage of. Now they want to take advantage of somebody else. Or it's like, you know, I'm not afraid. I make people afraid, or you know, I don't get anxiety. I give people anxiety. I don't get ulcers. I give them out. That kind of thing.
Mm.
So moving past it, these are unfortunately also the least likely people to like seek therapy or counseling, or even to ask for advice or whatever, because they're the least likely to acknowledge that they have a flaw or a weakness. They work very hard not to ever acknowledge that. And to the fact, you know, I don't have problems. You're the one that has a problem. You know, like they're the ones that will say that. Ain't nothing wrong with me. It's you that's the problem, right? Like, and so they rarely get help unless it's come to like some sort of drastic thing where like, oh, they're forced, you know, court ordered to go into anger management classes, for example. That's like, you know, the more common scenario where they'll get the help they need. Um, they have to, this is just, I'm regurgitating the book at this point. Like these are the people that have to kind of go back and acknowledge those early environmental failures that we're talking about. Like we need to go back and talk about that violence and horror and abuse that you witnessed as a child. Or we need to go back and talk about, you know, in some ways, like you were not allowed to be yourself because your mother or your father made you who they wanted to be, you know, who they wanted to be. Whatever it is, it's just like, okay, let's turn that light bulb on to at least become aware of this is what happened to you, and this is how that is playing out still in your adult life. You're continuing to be this false, you know, beauty pageant queen that your mom told you to be, or you know, whatever it may be, or you're continuing this horror and violence. You're still trapped in that period of helplessness as a child.
Mm.
So all in all, like let's recognize that what happened as a child is not present now. And then a very difficult one is like, you know, how do we develop the capacity for you to be vulnerable? It's okay to admit a flaw. It's okay to be, you know, messed up. We're all messed up, you know, and so let's, you know, not be as triggered by those times where you're not your best, like, you know, and just see that as normal. Um, and to recognize that that's actually what power is. Power and strength is not being able to win. These people tend to be very hyper competitive. They have a very strong fueled need to win. Um, you know, that's not what power means. That doesn't make you the best. You know, sometimes it's actually being okay and managing, those times where you lose. That's where it actually takes strength. I think I heard a speaker say before, like um, you don't show me that you're a man, but when you have a bunch of money and women and the cars and all that kind of stuff, it's when those things are gone and you're back against a wall and you don't have anybody and you don't have anything, that's when we get to see how much of a man you are. That's kind of like the realization that comes with this person when they begin to heal. All right, that's it. So